Twin brother Reggie controlled organised crime in the East End of London in the 60s. Both were jailed for life in 1969 after being convicted of murder.
Ronnie Kray was let out of Broadmoor in the early 80s to attend his mother's funeral. It's thought he could now be buried in the same cemetery, a funeral likely to bring much of London's East End to a standstill. The notorious gangster had collapsed in his room at Broadmoor Hospital on Wednesday. He died this morning after being transferred to another hospital in Slough. Born in 1933 in the heart of the East End, Ronnie and his twin brother Reggie started out as boxers. They became the most feared of London's gang leaders. Ronnie was the violent, dominant partner. Their extensive protection racket, known as the Firm, existed to extort money from shopkeepers, enabling the twins to visibly enjoy the high life. Desperate for fame, they cultivated the world of show business and the media. But the law was aware of them. In the mid-60s, the pair were charged with demanding money with menaces, only to be acquitted.
How much has this trial cost you?
It's cost us roughly £8,000.
And how do you feel about that?
I don't suppose anyone likes the idea of spending that money for no reason at all, you know.
Does it leave you broke, or how does it leave you?
It doesn't leave us broke, but at the same time it's a lot of money to have to pay out when money's innocent.
Ronnie held court in his front room in Bethnal Green, controlling West End protection, masterminding swindles, ordering killings over cups of tea. It was at the Blind Beggar pub in Whitechapel that Ronnie himself shot dead a rival, George Cornell. For that and another murder by Reggie, the pair were jailed in 1969. Today, at the Blind Beggar, one of their closest friends was mourning Ronnie's death.
They were good guys, they were good gangsters, if you want to use such a word. They wouldn't harm women or children, they were untouchable.
If people want to talk about the victims, like Jack McVitie or George Cornell and that, they were hardened criminals the same as him. They would have done to Ronnie and Reggie what they'd done to them, and that must always be remembered.
Others, though, were under no illusions. For the policemen who finally caught the Krays, they were far from glamorous heroes.
There's no question about what prevented witnesses giving evidence to suggest that the Krays are involved, and that was terror. Just absolute fear and terror.
I think they're an extraordinarily murderous, effective pair of gangsters. I think that's been covered up, I say, with a lot of schmaltz, a lot of silly sentimental twaddle, but they were very, very good at their job. If they hadn't started killing people, they probably would have been in the House of Lords by now, I think.
Ronnie Kray died in hospital 2 days after collapsing in Broadmoor prison, where he'd been since 1969. ITN's Paul Davis looks back on an extraordinary life of crime.
Gang leader, killer and schizophrenic. Ronnie Kray, in the glasses here, filmed attending his mother's funeral 13 years ago before returning to Broadmoor and a life sentence that ended with his death this morning. Known as the Firm, Ronnie and twin Reggie ruled London's East End in the early 60s, a reign that somehow horrified and fascinated the British public. Both had trained as boxers and used violence to impose their protection rackets. Ronnie, on the left of his mother here, was a paranoid schizophrenic, the most volatile and unpredictable of the two.
Very mad. I mean, he would see messages from television, he would thought that people were out to kill him, he would see threat everywhere. And this is what made him so ferocious and so dangerous, because from a quite innocuous sort of remark or glance, suddenly Ronnie Kray would turn on someone.
The Krays nightclubs attracted celebrities like Christine Keeler. Judy Garland was another visitor. The twins themselves enjoyed celebrity status until a crackdown on London's gangs ended with both being driven away from the Old Bailey, jailed for life for the murders of George Cornell and Jack the Hat McVitie. Around the East End and the pub where George Cornell was shot dead, there are those who remember Ronnie Kray with affection.
Ronnie Kray, his attitude to life was this: if you do harm to me, I'm going to do harm to you. And I think we all lived by that. We were at the East End, and that's how we saw life. I'm not saying it's right, but at least we didn't harm any innocent member of the public.
He had very good principles that wouldn't agree with some people, but certainly principles that agree with me. And women and children, he loved them.
But perhaps the last chapter of the gangster's life was most accurately illustrated by these pictures inside Broadmoor. The small cell where Ronnie Kray spent the years of incarceration. And the man himself, prematurely aged by the drugs he was being treated with, and according to a journalist he befriended, regretting the wasted years.
He never apologised for it, rightly or wrongly, but he never ever tried to make excuses for it. And when he looked back on it, he always said he regarded it as a wasted life.
The actress Barbara Windsor, an old friend of the Krays, said today she was saddened by the circumstances of his death.
I am sad because 28 years to be in Broadmoor is a very long time, and I know they were looking forward to coming out and spending their last years in the country.
Ronnie Kray is expected to be buried alongside his mother in London's East End.
But the horse-drawn hearse and the long cortege were there for one of the East End's most notorious criminals, the convicted murderer Ronnie Kray. His twin brother Reggie was allowed out of Maidstone prison to pay his last respects. Paul Davis reports.
It was the East End send-off that Ronnie Kray planned in his prison cell and requested before his death. From early this morning, security men hired by the Kray family guarded the funeral parlour in Bethnal Green, where the procession would begin. Among the floral tributes to the former gangster and convicted killer, this from his twin Reggie, who'd been given permission to leave prison for the day to attend the funeral. Reggie Kray appeared handcuffed to a prison officer as the cortege prepared to move off. The funeral route took the procession along streets the Kray twins used to rule with their own brand of terror and protection rackets back in the early 60s. There were large crowds, although most were curious onlookers. It's debatable whether Ronnie Kray would recognise the East End of today. The coffin was carried along Valence Road, where the Krays used to live, although the terraced family home was demolished many years ago. At St Matthew's Church, the principal mourner, Reggie Kray, was greeted by old friends, many of whom are now campaigning for his release. The Kray family, defending today's spectacular funeral, say people should not forget that Ronnie Kray was mentally ill when he committed his crimes.
I've always said, not making excuses, it's known doctors will tell you, but the one thing I would love people to remember, who say bad things, remember he had an illness, and if it wasn't for that, he would have been a different person.
Thousands of people lined the streets to watch the funeral procession.
Ronnie Kray had wanted a traditional East End funeral. His family and friends made sure his wishes were respected down to the last detail, the extravagance of the occasion only adding to the Krays' mythology. For all the evidence of their violent past, there are still those who maintain the twins preyed only on their own, extorting money from other villains and conducting vicious gangland vendettas. Questioned about his murderous past, Ronnie Kray would simply say, "We never killed any members of the public." Whatever the reality, EastEnders turned out in their thousands to see his coffin pass by, many cheering and applauding a procession that stretched right across Bethnal Green as limousines followed the hearse to the church. Among a mass of flowers, a tribute from his twin brother Reggie, "To the other half of me." Having been allowed out of prison to attend the funeral, Reggie's arrival at the church was loudly cheered. Many in the East End think his sentence, to serve not less than 30 years, is too long, and they now want him released. The twins' older brother Charlie helped carry the coffin into church, along with pallbearers from the London Manors, once engaged in bitter rivalry with the Krays. During the service, held behind closed doors, the mourners sang the hymn "Fight the Good Fight" and listened to a recording of one of Ronnie's favourite songs, "I Did It My Way." In life, Ronnie Kray revelled in his dubious status as a gangland celebrity. The style of his departure would have been very much to his liking. Peter Gould, BBC News, Bethnal Green.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly, moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope